My name is Camille. I was born in December 1864 in Villeneuve-sur-Fer, my mother's hometown. I had a sister, Louise, named after my mother, and a little brother, Paul, who became a famous writer. I believe for a long time that work and perseverance will help me to obtain a place in the world of fine arts in France, a place among other sculptors. I was wrong. I was only a woman after all. From as far as I can remember, I loved to sketch, to do clay modeling. Everyone in the house was my model. I even used the photos on the newspapers to create some portraits. In 1876, our family moved to Nogent-sur-Seine. There, I met my first teacher of sculpture, Mr. Alfred Boucher. He said that I was talented and pushed my parents to encourage my passion for the sculpture. In 1881, my mother hardly accepted to be sent to Paris to satisfy my father's ambition regarding our artistic education. In Paris, she lost her social aura. In this big city, she was a bourgeoise like so many others. I think she persuaded herself that all her discomfort was because of me. Her resentment grew bigger and bigger. She was going back to Villeneuve as frequently as she could. She did not understand my need to learn more about sculpture in Paris. I was 18 years old when I met the portrait of La Vieille Hélène. I was able to enter in the school Colarossi, where women were allowed to attend classes sketching nude model. It was the best way to learn anatomy. Alfred Boucher was coming to Paris once a week to see my progress. He presented my work to the director of the Fine Art School, where women were forbidden to attend nude classes for decency reasons. Paul Dubois assumed, looking at my pieces, that I had been the student of Auguste Rodin. I denied it strongly. Indeed, I never had heard of this guy before. In 1882, I shared a studio in Rue Notre-Dame-des-Champs with other girls, Amy Singer, Emily Fawcett, and later Jessie Lescombe. Those English girls were so fun, and they let me choose the models and their pose. Alfred Boucher had to go to Italy, so he asked one of his friends, Auguste Rodin, to replace him to be our teacher. I remember his first remark: "When you follow the nature, you get everything." Was it my nature to follow my passion? I did believe that I would obtain everything just by being truthful to my work, to my sculpture, to Rodin. I may have been influenced by him at first, but I definitely wanted to find my own path. After receiving his commission of the bourgeois of Calais, Rodin needed more assistance. He invited me and Jessie to work for him in his studio. The best way to learn is to practice, to earn your bread, and from time to time you will take few days to do your own work. You will do more progress than going to the school. Jessie boarded at our home. She was older than me and supposed to be my chaperone. We were included in the team of practitioners, molders, and models, working 12 hours a day, totally exhausted but so proud to be part of the creation. Rodin was so pleased with my work that he asked me to create the hands and the feet of his bourgeois. Next time you look at them, remember, those are my hands, my feet. It was so difficult to work all day long for Rodin, learning his style, and after that, going back to mine. Rodin took some of my works and signed his name on it. I was so proud. And anyway, it was the tradition in every sculpture studio. The master would sign the pieces that he would consider worthy of his genius. I don't really remember how our love story began. At first, I guess, I was mesmerized by the interest he showed in me. We were very discreet. He was my first man. He was 22 years older than me, but our love for sculpture was the cement of our passion. It took me a while to understand that I was not the only woman in his life. He already had a companion, Rose Beuret, and a child from her. As soon as Jessie knew about my liaison with Rodin, she was afraid for my reputation and encouraged me to leave Paris and go to London to visit our friends and present my portrait of Giganti at the Royal Academy. Rodin found a pretext to follow me in England. He arrived at the Lescombe house and stayed a few days. I managed not to stay alone with him. I could not afford a scandal. Returning in Paris, I tried to stay more at my old studio. I was working on my first big pieces. On one evening of October 1886, he came to my place and handed me a letter that he called a contract to prove me his true feelings. With his broken grammar, he promised me that I would be his only student, that he would present me his influential friends to help my career, that we will go to Italy for at minimum 6 months after the completion of his present commission. He wanted to show me Michelangelo, and after returning from Italy, he would marry me. In exchange, I had to agree that I would allow him to come to my place 4 times a month. Finally, up to our departure to Italy, I should stay in Paris. He insisted on signing this contract, both of us. Was I really fooled by all his beautiful premises? Let's say that I needed to believe it. The tension with my mother was growing. She openly despised my art and my aim to be a sculptor, considering that my place was at home with a husband and some kids to take care of. I could not fight in every aspect of my life. In 1887, I created The Girl with the Shift, that would strongly inspire Rodin 2 years later for his Galathea. 1888, I presented Sakuntala, my first big sculpture. I got an honorable mention at the Salon. I was thrilled. After that, I tried to obtain a block of marble for this sculpture, but without an official commission, it was impossible. To be the student of Rodin did not help me at all. The same year, Louise got married. My mother was so upset with me that her reproaches would never stop. I was the eldest daughter. I should have been married first. I realized that I was no longer welcome in this house. I was a disgrace for her. I found an apartment on the Boulevard d'Italie. Rodin helped me to pay the rent, and he found nearby a big house, La Folie-Neubourg, where we could work together, and our love would be far from indiscreet eyes. But he refused to leave Rose, and had an apartment with her, Rue de Bourgogne. At that time, my brother Paul was aware of my liaison with Rodin. And being a Catholic newly touched by the religion, he despised me for that. But because he was my little brother and I loved him, I urged Rodin to write a recommendation letter to allow him to enter at the foreign ministry. For Paul, the artist life was not an option. He wanted to have a comfortable and dignified life. For me, a day without sculpting was unbearable. At the International Fair of 1888, Rodin wanted to present me to the official personalities, of course, as his student. I refused and let him down. I was more interested by the exhibition of Hokusai at the Japanese pavilion. Later, it will be one of my inspiration for one of my best sculpture. In July 1889, we made our first escapade to the Château de Lillette in Touraine. He rented this place during several summers. There, we were Mr. and Mrs. Rodin. But in fact, I was the only one to believe it. For several years, Rodin and I worked together, but as equal. I was not considering myself as his student anymore. I was posing for him. He learned how to represent the softness of a woman's body. He was asking for my advice. His Hell-Doors was not finished, and he had difficulties to complete it. The trip to Italy was always postponed because new commissions arrived, and he was still dividing his time between me and Rose. I continued to help him as his assistant for several of his projects, like the Victor Hugo, the Balzac, and the memorial to Claude Lorrain. In March 1893, I managed to finish the Valse couple. I obtained an official commission and I request a marble to create a version to be delivered to the Fine Arts Salon. But the director of this institution considered that a woman could not or should not sculpt like that. Such sensuality was outrageous, and he denied me the right to finish my job. I was so devastated and furious, but Rodin tried to calm me, saying that I had to give the time to the institution to accept my talent. At the Salon of the Champ de Mars, I presented Clotho and the new version of the Valse. When I got pregnant, suddenly the reality punched me hard. Rodin was very clear. I had to get rid of it. There was no way I could keep the baby since I was not married. I got an abortion in a horrendous condition, as it was a crime in France at that time, and I hid my sorrows at the Château de Lillette, arriving alone and so in bad shape that the owner offered me to stay longer. In exchange, I would make the portrait of her child. This little girl accepted to pose for me, and this work helped me a lot to ease my sorrow. Meanwhile, Rodin was buying a house in Meudon where he would stay with Rose. When I get back to Paris, my decision was irrevocable. I was leaving Rodin's studio. I would never work for him again. I would lose the meager salary he was paying me as his assistant, but I would find my own commissioners. Meanwhile, I would ask my father for a temporary help. But the rumor has preceded me. My father did not utter a reproach, but he informed me that I was no longer authorized to visit my mother. She would never see me again, and Paul had left for his Boston position. Only the work would help me survive all those losses. I was broke and the future was not as bright as I had hoped. Fortunately, in February 1894, I received an invitation to the Brussels Salon to present 4 pieces. I was over the moon. I wrote to Paul because I needed his financial support to achieve the pieces before the exhibition. I created the first part of the mature age with the imploring. In 1895, I decided to give another orientation to my work. Far from the gigantic work of Rodin, I would create small pieces, more authentic, more intimate. I created the group of Les Causeuses that I presented at the 6th exhibition of the National Society of Fine Arts. It was a great success. In April 1896, Rodin wrote to inform me that he wanted to present me to Félix IV, the President of the Republic. He was probably assuming that I would be flattered. But I instantly recognized the trap. Accepting his invitation would imply that I was still professionally linked to him. And that I could not accept. So I wrote him back that I did not have the proper dress to meet such an important person, and I declined the invitation. A year later, I was working on the mature age group Sculptor. It was so big, and I had so few resources. I was surviving on eggs and potatoes. The pressure was intense. When I received the visit of the inspector of the Minister of Fine Arts, who wanted to commission a bust, I tried to persuade him that my group of the mature age was more interesting, and I received a subvention of 2,500 francs for a plaster version of the group. I was over the moon, but I considered that I could do better, so I began to work on a second version. Rodin tried to approach me, pretexting that he wanted to present my studio to Mr. Ferraille, an industrial willing to finance my project of the wave. I had to receive them. The onyx is a very capricious and fragile stone, but I had to succeed, for I knew that the great Rodin would never dare to sculpt directly this stone. I would. At the Salon of 1899, when Rodin discovered my mature age group, he considered that I was exposing him and his double life. He was outraged, and he used all of his influence to cancel the commission of the marble version that I was supposed to get after the exhibition. His vengeance was just beginning. I begged for a bronze print commission several times, but each time my request was refused. But the critics, certainly all in the hands of Rodin, were terrible. I was devastated, and my hatred for Rodin was so thick that I could not sleep at night. I decided then to move to the Ile Saint-Louis, where the rent were lower than in the rest of Paris. I had so few commissioners that I had to work all by myself, doing the modeling and the work on the marble. The Comtesse de Maigret was good enough to commission 2 portraits and a large sculpture of Persée and Gorgone. But in 1901, when I tried to present the portrait of the Comtesse de Maigret at the Salon, it was refused. Meanwhile, the sinister Rodin was flying with the stars. Everybody's mouth was full of Rodin praise, and nobody wanted to see my work. When Paul returned from China, I insisted to make his portrait. I saw in his eyes that he was worried, but accepted to pose once for me. 1905, I finished Vertum and Pomone version in marble and a small version named Abandon. I was desperate to sell something. Sometimes, to release the pressure of the baïf, I was venturing myself to Villeneuve, when I was sure that my mother was staying in Paris. My father never refused to help me. But he did not follow me when I assured him that Rodin was doing everything to harm me. He did not want to hear that, so I had to keep it to myself. Nobody wanted to believe me. I was so lonely. I was doing some marcotage, reusing some parts of ancient works to create new pieces because I was too tired to create new things from scratch, and I didn't have the money to buy material. After all, Rodin was doing that all the time. For the Hell's Door and other pieces. Why not me? When Paul came back in 1909, he looked at me so strangely. I felt scrutinized and judged. My studio was full of destroyed pieces because I could not accept that Rodin may enter while I was out. I had to wander for some food at the end of the market, even sometimes scavenging into the garbage boxes. I prefer to destroy the pieces I create. He would not be able to steal my ideas. In December 1910, I was alone in my studio when I realized that it was my birthday. I was 46 years old, and nobody was there to wish me a happy birthday. Was I dead to the world already? The next few years passed in a haze. I was scarcely working. I only had visit of bailiff, taking my furnitures one by one. My bed was the last furniture left. I did not want to get out of it. I was sick and tired. So tired. My father died March 2nd, 1913. The funeral was done. Nobody cared to inform me, not even my little Paul. On the morning of the 10th of March, they came to pick me up and send me to the asylum. I learned years later that my brother and my mother decided together my internment. The doctor showed me the document they both signed. At the beginning of the war in 1914, the asylum was evacuated to the south at Monteverge. It was the beginning of my entombment. Over the 30 years I spent in Monteverge, my brother came only 13 times, and out of him I was not allowed to receive any letter or other visit. Upon the request of my mother, Jessie managed to come to see me. She also tried to persuade my family that my pension had to be terminated. She failed to convince them. I died of hunger in 1943 because the Nazi occupying France decided that it was a waste to feed the interns of the asylums. After my death, my brother and sister did not care about my funeral, so my remains were thrown into the mass grave. Remember me through my works. You can see them in the Rodin Museum, in Orsay Museum, and in the museum bearing my name in Nogent-sur-Seine.